now that you have started using CoCoALib, you want to know more about what you can really do with CoCoALib. CoCoALib is big, and how can you know everything? Of course you can't. So one good way to start, if you have enough experience in COCOA 5, is knowing what you can do in COCOA 5 and not in CoCoALib, and vice versa. So one interesting thing is this translation table that we have between the old COCOA 4, COCOA 5, and CoCoALib. So COCOA 4 was an old version of COCOA, and while creating the new CoCoALib and COCOA 5, we had this table to see how well we were doing in translating all the functions from COCOA 5, from COCOA 4. Now COCOA 5 is quite a bit more powerful than COCOA 4. So the main column here is the central column for COCOA 5. So here we have the function, how it is called in COCOA 5, and the related function that we find in CoCoALib. Sometimes it is really identical, like abs. Sometimes there are many versions, like in this case, we can compute adjoint in different ways. At least this gives us an idea where to look in the manual, what are the possibilities if there is a function or not, and then look at the specific indications in the proper manual. So I show you some of the things that we have already met so that you get a bit of a feeling how to use this table. So we have and, for example, and in COCOA 5 translate into the C code for it, which is ampersand. Append, we have already met how to add an element to the tail of a vector, and this is pushback as a CoCoALib function for some specific classes, or the standard template library pushback, as we saw yesterday. So then other functions, I have a list here that I want to show you. Asint. Asint in COCOA 5 is useful for taking a ring LM, which is actually an integer, and converting it into a proper naked integer in COCOA 5, which can be useful if you want to pass numbers from one ring to another when they do not have the same characteristic of the same base ring. And this is done in two ways in CoCoALib, because in CoCoALib we can use the machine integers, so it is a convert to int or convert to long. We said that we use long in CoCoALib, or a big integer. So in this case, this is the syntax for making a for checking if a ring LM is actually an integer and setting into a big int, which is with arbitrary precision integer in COCOA 5. Same for the rational. Then another interesting function is first. You might like to go through this table just to have an idea of what you can find both in COCOA 5 and in CoCoALib. So first is the first element in the list, which you can call as L of 1, of course, but there is also the command first. First actually gives you the first element, or a range, the first range of elements. So how do you do that? In CoCoALib, we use the command front, and we have used it in our example for computing Grosvenor bases in CoCoALib, or a range constructor, which allows us to create a sub-vector of a given vector. Then I want to tell you about print. I show you the things you already know, which is a bit funny, but if you see the menu, if you see how it looks for things you already know, then you understand better how things you don't know are written down. So print. This is long, and you see how many things we have. Print. Okay, we have seen that print in CoCoALib is cout in C++, cout less than, and print line should be converted into cout less than the thing you want to print, and then endl at the end for the end of line. Then QQ. In COCOA 5, we have used QQ as the field of the rationals, and you can also use ring QQ as a function. In CoCoALib, there is no global variable called QQ, so if you want to make a ring of rationals, you have to call ring QQ. As you might notice, this is not new ring QQ. So there is only one copy of the QQ ring inside CoCoALib. So if you call it many times, it is always the same ring. Then we have seen append, and there is the function remove you have on the lists in COCOA 5, and when you translate into CoCoALib, then there is the STL function remove if, so which does almost the same. So we do this so that you can even have some hints on what you should use in C++ to do the things that are implemented in a more friendly manner in COCOA 5. Similar, you have ref. We have used it when calling append, which is the call by reference, which in C++ is this ampersand, which means it is an argument which is called by reference. Remove, reverse, reverse, here it is. So in COCOA, there is a function that reverses a list, and in C++, we don't need to reverse a list because there is something very handy, which is called a reverse iterator, which goes from the last to the first. So we don't move things in memory, we just access in the reverse order. This works both for a vector and for a list, STL vectors and lists in CoCoALib. Another function which might be useful in your programs is sort. Here it is, and for sort there is the function mySort or sort by STL, depending on the type and the class you're using. And another thing that you might find interesting that we have already met again is time from. If I see it, I don't. Time from, here it is. So in COCOA 5, we have a function which is called time from. In CoCoALib, we don't, because in fact, in CoCoALib, it is easier because CPU time minus T0 is already a double and prints fine as a double, whereas in COCOA 5, the time is represented by a rational number, and so it is unreadable. And so the function time from actually was a shortcut for saying do CPU time minus T0 and convert it into something that I can read as a human. So now you know this page. This page is quite interesting. It is I must say, not updated very often. So it could be incomplete. But I think it's very useful if you're a beginner. So I do suggest that you look in this list before searching much in the manual, especially if you are confident in COCOA 5. If you find mistakes, please write to me and I'll update it. Okay, that is all for the translation table.